Hello, Dr. King.
Hello, Mr. Dixon.
Dr. King, let us start off with your childhood. What are some of the events that took place?
Well, at the age of 12, my beloved grandmother passed away,
Mm-hmm.
and I tried to commit suicide by jumping off my second-story house. Then, when I reached high school, I skipped the ninth and 11th grade, and I attended Morehouse College at the age of 15.
Wow, I'm truly impressed. A kid that young attending college. How was college being that young in it?
Well, in my first 2 years, I truly wasn't motivated.
Mm-hmm.
And until my junior year, I took a Bible class, and that renewed my faith, and
Mm-hmm.
I envisioned a career in the ministry.
Mm-hmm. Um, did you, a lot of kids when they go off to college, they talk about having fun and stuff like that. Dr. King, let me ask you, did you have any fun while you were in college?
Well, I drank beer, I
Mm-hmm.
played pool, and I was involved with a white woman, but I cut that affair.
Okay. Tell us about your family. How did that come about?
Well, while I was working for my PhD, I met Coretta Scott at the New England Conservatory School in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
She was an inspiring singer and musician. We married in June 1953, and we have four wonderful children: Yolanda, Martin Luther King III, Dexter Scott, and Bernice.
Dr. King, tell us about your experience leading the Montgomery bus boycott.
Well, there was Nixon Pullman Porter Long, who identified with the NAACP.
Mm-hmm.
He already bonded with Mrs. Parks out of prison, and he said, "This time it stops. We ought to boycott the buses." And I agreed with him, and I said, "Now." The next night, we called a meeting of the Negro community leaders to discuss it, and on Saturday and Sunday, we appealed to the Negro community with leaflets and from pulpits to boycott the buses on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
We had in mind a one-day boycott, and we were banking on 60% success.
Mm-hmm.
But we saw instantaneous 99% success. We were so pleasantly surprised and impressed that we continued, and for the next 381 days, the boycott of Montgomery's buses by Negroes was 99% successful.
Wow. After the boycott, you and a group of other civil rights leaders established the SCLC. What are your sole aims for that conference?
Well, we had 5 aims. First, to stimulate nonviolent, direct mass action to expose and remove the barriers of segregation and discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
Second, to disseminate the creative philosophy and techniques of nonviolence through local and area workshops. Third, to secure the right and unhampered to use the ballot for every citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Fourth, to achieve full citizenship rights and the total integration of Negro into American life. And fifth, to reduce the cultural lag through our citizen traineeship program.
Okay. A lot of the ministers felt, a lot of the Negro ministers felt they didn't want to belong there. How did you deal with that?
I must say that when my Southern Christian Leadership Conference began its work in Birmingham, we encountered numerous Negro church reactions that had to be overcome. Negro ministers, among other Negro leaders, they weren't excited that they were being pulled into something that they had not helped organize. This was always a problem. Negro community unity was the first requisite if our goal was to be realized.
Okay. You in a lot of your speeches, a lot of your demonstrations, your number one thing is nonviolence, the theory of nonviolence. How did that theory come about originally?
Well, it came from India's Gandhi as the guiding light of our technique of nonviolent social change. And that's why I traveled to India to deepen my understanding of the Gandhian principles.
Mm-hmm. You and President John F. Kennedy obviously had a close relationship, because, he talked a lot about civil rights and about improving the conditions and all that. What was your idea when you proposed a second Emancipation Proclamation to President Kennedy?
The envisioned second Emancipation Proclamation was to use the powers of the executive office to strike down severe blooded segregation.
Your letter from a Birmingham jail, was wrote, to Protestants and Catholics who had criticized, what you were doing. Because of the letter, what has happened?
2 or 3 important and constructive things have happened, which can at least be partially attributed to that letter. By now, nearly 1 million copies of that letter have been widely circulated in churches of most of major denominations. It helped focus greater international attention upon what was happening in Birmingham. And I am sure that without Birmingham, the March on Washington would have been called, which in my mind was one of the most creative steps that the Negro struggle has taken. The March of Washington spurred and galvanized the conscience of millions. It gave American Negro a new national and international stature. The press of the world recorded the story as nearly 250,000 Americans, white and black, assembled in grandeur as testimonial to the Negro's determination to achieve freedom in this generation. It was also the image of Birmingham which, to a greater extent, helped bring the Civil Rights Bill into being in 1963.
You know, Dr. King, let me try something else. Another general question. All revolutions, as far as I know, in the past have had the tendency to move towards a centralized leadership. To move towards a man who has both a power and symbolic function. Though we see the tendency to focus on single leadership, can a revolution truly survive with this symbolic focus, even without a literal focus under single leadership?
Yes, I think a revolution can't survive without the single centralized leadership. But I do think there must be centralized leadership in the sense that, say, in our struggle, all our leaders coordinate their efforts, cooperate, and at least advance a degree of unity.
You know, the March on Washington was a huge demonstration, you know, obviously. Okay. The March on Washington was obviously a huge demonstration. You know, how was that demonstration established?
By the end of my Birmingham campaign, I and my supporters were making a massive demonstration on the nation's capital, composed of multiple organizations to emphasize that someday all men could be brothers.
Okay. You know, many Southern whites, you know, have accused you of being among those who exploit the race problem for private gain. You are widely believed throughout the South, in fact, to have amassed a vast personal fortune in the course of your civil rights activities.
Me?
Is that true?
Wealthy? This is so utterly erroneous that I often wonder where it got started. For the 6 straight years since I've been SCLC's president, I have rejected our board's insistent recommendation that I accept some salary beyond the $1 a year which I receive, which entitles me to participate in our employees' group insurance plan. I have rejected also our board's offer of financial gifts as a measure and expression of appreciation. My only salary is from the church, $4,000 a year, and $2,000 more a year for what is known as pastoral care. To earn a grand total of about $10,000 a year, I keep about $4,000 to $5,000 a year for myself for the honorariums that I receive for various speaking engagements. About 90% of my speaking engagements is for SCLC, and it brings into our treasury something around $200,000 a year. Additionally, I get a fairly sizable but fluctuating income in the form of royalties from my writings, but all of this, too, I give to my church, or to my alma mater, Morehouse College, here in Atlanta. $dollars a year. Additionally, I get a fairly sizable but fluctuating income in the form of royalties from my writings, but all of this, too, I give to my church, or to my alma mater, Morehouse College, here in Atlanta.
You know, obviously, you're being a big civil rights leader. You spend a lot of time away from home. You know, your schedule of speaking engagements and civil rights commitments throughout the country is punishing on often 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, according to reports. How much time do you actually get to spend at home?
Well, it's very little indeed. I average not more than 2 days a week at home here in Atlanta over the past year, or since Birmingham, actually. I'm away 2 and 3 weeks at a time, mostly working in communities across the South. Wherever I am, I try to be in a pulpit as many Sundays. On Tuesdays, when I'm not out of town, I don't go into the office. I keep this for my quiet day of reading, silence, and meditation, and an entire evening with Mrs. King and the children.
You know, Dr. King, you know, throughout this whole civil rights movement, there has been a lot of ugly things that went on, you know, in the Birmingham demonstration, you know, dogs, water hoses, and you've also seen a lot of good things throughout this movement. Can you tell me, what is the one thing that has touched your heart the most?
Well, in a demonstration in Birmingham, I saw a girl about 8 or 9 years demonstrating with her mother when this white policeman asked the girl, "What do you want?" The girl looked him straight in the eyes and said, "Feed him." She couldn't even say it, but she knew what it meant.
Wow. You know, lastly, Dr. King, you know, what is your dream for the United States?
My dream is that all people